And that's where we start off from: curbing violence and insecurity across the country. Remember that headline story we had on Vanguard, return of bandits? Not too good a story. But then we'll start off here in Abuja with our guest, Barrister Felix Ogbaldu, is a retired Assistant Inspector General of Police. Thank you for joining us here.
Thank you very much for having me.
And in our Lagos, thank you. Yeah. And in our Lagos studio, we have Alfred Ononubo, who's a forensic investigator and criminal intelligence specialist, a security consultant. Thank you for joining us, Alfred.
Thank you very much.
Let's start out here. Barrister Ogbaldu, you are a retired Assistant Inspector General of Police.
Yeah.
When you are, if I say now, how would you assess the security situation in Nigeria at the moment? I mean, look at that story on the front page of the Vanguard, for instance, return of the bandits. That sounds like there was a time they were quiet, or they were non-existent, or it looks as if they left and then they are coming back now. So how would you assess the situation right?
Well, we've had very serious security challenges in the past, and security agencies did their utmost best to contain the situation. There wasn't a point, it was the military was saying that Boko Haram had been decimated. We'll talk about that later. And when the elections started coming up, campaigns here and there before the elections actually took place, you know the way politicians in Nigeria behave. They recruit young persons as thugs, perpetrate violence and all of that. That's why we're degenerating to what the situation was like in the past. But it's not as bad as what it used to be many, many years back. That's the gospel truth. We've had a few cases of security breaches, attacks, people being killed, houses being burned in the states that were mentioned in one of the papers this morning. So it's worrisome, but it's not that bad. It's not that bad. I'm very certain, very confident too that as security agencies will rise up to the occasion to contain the situation.
When you say I like you're confident, but how would the person or the Nigerian who reads this, knowing that during the elections proper, it was as if everywhere was quiet, and then suddenly there seemed to be one hit here, one hit there. What happened at that time? I mean, at that point in time, even the security personnel were spread across the country to monitor the elections. And so there was quiet. But now everybody's back to focus on security issues, not election issues. And it's as though the bandits are up again. What's amiss?
You see, this is the problem we've always had. When we have security challenges in certain areas, we deploy enough security men to contain the situation. And when normalcy is restored, they are pulled out completely. What we are supposed to be doing is, when you overcome a situation, make sure you sustain security presence in that place. When I saw the video clip on what happened in Kogi State, I was so sad. Number of security officers who were deployed to that place after the incident. And so the situation has returned back to normal and all of that. There must be security presence at all times. There must be security presence at all times. We don't have to. This fire brigade approach doesn't solve any problem. We must have adequate security presence all over the place. Then again, the various communities should also have their own security. Maybe vigilantes, for instance. If you go to some of the francophone countries that border Nigeria, if a stranger gets to any of those communities in less than 15 minutes, the village head or the traditional ruler, they will be informed. And the local security agents, operatives, will go and pick up that guy and say, my friend, who are you? Where are you from? What are you here for? And these are some of the measures we need to put in place here.
But because
security is a collective responsibility. We cannot all put all of this in the basket, on the shoulders of the security agencies. You know, the problem again is that even if you have all of that in Nigeria, the level of sustainability, the motivation, and make sure that they are on their duties, perform their duties 24/7. Or no such monitoring facilities and all of that. That is a mistake we always make.
You know, the Nigeria police talks about community policing.
Yes.
And getting everybody involved.
Yes.
I even at the point they were appointing civilian constables. Is that not sustainable? And how effective has that been in curbing insecurity and ending violence?
Well, it is talking about sustainability. That is where the government has to do much more than what it is doing now. It's not just recruiting these guys and pushing them there and you turn your back against it. No, it doesn't work out that way. Monitor what they're doing, support them, ask them what they need to perform optimally. That's the situation. You see, because in this country, like I've always said, we don't want to prioritize security. I don't want to mention agencies and government partners, all of that, where so much money is spent for doing next to nothing. Well, in security, not much. Then you can imagine the number of personnel that security agencies lose on a daily basis or monthly basis or annually.
Let me take this to Mr. Onanubo. Mr. Onanubo, you are more or less like from the outside in. You're assessing the situation as a security consultant. I mean, the barrister here about has talked about deployment, motivation. They're bringing in the community as a part of the security apparatus and then prioritizing security. But what's your own take in terms of assessment of what the situation is?
Okay, I tend to agree with him. First, let me condole with the families of those who lost their lives recently in the recent attacks across the country. It's painful to repeat same thing over and over and over again. And while the people are getting insecure by the day, the environment seems to suggest we haven't yet found our way out of the woods. I also want to appreciate the efforts of the Nigerian security services. It's not a cheap task containing insurgency in the country. There are factors behind the inability of these agencies to put their feet on the head of the insurgency. However, we might have to rethink and begin to look at the institutions managing these challenges. We have the army, we have the police, we have the DSS, but the agents within these systems are products of our country. And like we often say, you can't get a clean fish from a poison pool. They have challenges probably affecting them either as individuals or as establishments.
Is that challenge part of the reason why intelligence fails?
Definitely it is. Because it takes, you might have applications.
Are you confirming that the intelligence fails? Because that was like a two-edged question.
They are human beings. Yes, intelligence fails. It's a global thing. It's not exclusive to Nigeria. The challenge, I think...
Is it at the level of gathering the intelligence?
No,
or
I think it's at the level of developing the capital assets to engage the challenges.
But as Nyota asked the other time, before the elections, it would seem like they kind of took a nosedive. All these insurgents kind of took a nosedive. And then during the elections, we weren't hearing much about them. And now, about a month after the elections, here we are again.
No, it's an assumption we're taking away because the political period introduced activities that took our minds probably off some of these activities of the criminals or the terrorists and insurgents and all the bandits across the country. And it will also be wrong to assume that they joined the political platforms to express themselves. However, it also there are elements of fact in the fact that there are possibilities that they had interests. They had people they felt should be able to address their concerns, and they saw them on the ballots And it will be unfair to say that we didn't see a decline in attacks across the country. The attacks did not escalate because our emphasis were on the politicians, their aspirations, and the process to produce them. So most people didn't focus, or the media generally didn't focus on the activities of these criminals.
I think the activities actually tapered down. In fact, there was a reference to, and maybe this is a challenge as well, to it being, maybe as a result of the cashless economy policy of the government saying, okay, the request for ransom in cash has dropped. So I remember there was that charter as well. And don't forget, we've seen these non-state actors actually getting involved in elections. In some communities, we've seen bandits actually helping the residents in that community to get their PVCs, or at least to liaise and say, okay, you know what, for this period, you can do the whole PVC process. And I think you referenced that when you said maybe they are interested in the outcome of the election. So it's not as though attention wasn't paid to it, but it actually tapered down. If anything, we actually saw a lot of, clashes, political clashes. So you forgive people who thought maybe these people actually joined the campaigns and were a part of it. So to that extent, is it as a result of that cashless policy, the electioneering process, or something was gotten right?
There were several factors that came to play during the election. Yeah, the cashless policy could have probably affected their calculations. They had time to rethink and reorganize themselves and consider other options to survive if the cashless policy and the intentions of the government should come through. Having said that, we also had situations where, like I said, sometimes people try to deny, but there is a mix between politics and some of these insurgent activities. They are interrelated. And the key component of these conflicts remains territories and superiority battles. People want territories. People also want their interests served. So they are human beings, like I said. They are part of the process. They live with us. No one moves around with a tag as a terrorist. There are people who live within the society, either those colluding or accessories to it, or those that were actively engaged. So we have scopes that accommodated everybody during the election period. Now that the elections are over, I have looked back, and I think we might not be ready for what we have gotten from the election. The post-election consequence is that there were probabilities some of their interests failed. There were also the challenge of not having access to funds because of the new policies of the government. There were also the incitement coming from political class, trying to ask their supporters to take a particular opinion on the outcome of the elections. So these are factors playing out right now. And the surge we are seeing doesn't seem like they were new. They were well thought out. You could see like what happened in the communities in Benue State. You could see that it was planned, and for 2 consecutive days in an instance, the bandits were hitting the communities non-stop. So the outcome, the post-election consequence, seems also to have added some zest to the challenge of the activities of the terrorists.
And I'm glad you've drawn a correlation between the politics of it all and insecurity, which is why I'm wondering, just whether we're being a bit too lenient by attributing failure of intelligence, to security agencies, to the extent that in some of these areas where attacks have occurred, there was a history of political violence there. For instance, in Dekina local government in Kogi State is a political battleground of 2 political heavyweights in that state. And there was a history of attacks also in 2019. In Chikun local government in Kaduna, there have been attacks there over time. So shouldn't we be a little more intense in our scrutiny of the work of security agencies ahead of the elections, amid the elections where there was needless violence, despite the promise that security agents made that they were going to give them a bloody nose?
Well, factually, the security had a lot to deal with pre, during, and post-elections. However, I tend to believe that we have not just started experiencing these insurgencies and attacks. Some sort of plans and provisions should have been made to checkmate these attacks coming back again. The reason being that we never defeated or eliminated these challenges. They were there. Probably the election came as a distraction with all the stuff that came with the elections. Now the elections are over. Some of them probably don't have any other jobs to do. No more campaigns, no more PVCs to collect, no more candidates to campaign for or support. And from the way things are going, it looks like some candidates had some contacts, because if they didn't know some of the players in these activities, how they got to seize their hostilities during the political window still stands as a surprise to so many of us. Was it that there were some level of interaction or interface between the politicians and the terrorists or bandits? I mean, we have a difficulty, classifying these groups. So there are elements that we have to look at. We will be wrong to draw conclusion that yes, it's exclusively a security thing. There could be other factors that are influencing.
But isn't my apologies? Isn't that the reason we have security agencies, to ensure that these things don't happen? Let me take that to Mr. Ogbaudu. One of the issues that you just heard Mr. Onanugo raise now is that indeed these things happened. We have security challenges in the area of security officials, intelligence failing, and all of those things. What do you make of that? The reason we have security agencies, the reason we have laws against crime and criminality is because there is the anticipation that such things could happen. And the primary responsibility of the police, it excites me to say this all the time, that the primary responsibility of the police is to prevent crime, not to fight it. So in that regard, it's assumed perhaps that the police should know well ahead in the event that these things should happen so as to forestall it. What do you make of that?
Well, thank you very much. If I got you very clearly, we've had intelligence gathering failures in the past. What I mean by that is that the intelligence we've had over time have not been sufficient. In some cases, no intelligence whatsoever. But the main issue is this. I would like to bring in some other new issues into this discussion. The first one is the absence of deterrence in this country that fuels so much of impunity. If we really want to have a secured nation, we can toe the line of nations like Saudi Arabia and Malaysia in their battle against drug trafficking. In these two nations, drug trafficking is a capital offense. That is why the citizens over there don't ever make the mistake of getting involved. But we see how Nigerians who leave this country with drugs, go to all those countries. Some years back, I don't want to mention the name of the president who was in the office at the time, a number of Nigerians were on the death row, and the tribe led the delegation to the president and appealed to him that they should please appeal to the president of that nation to grant these guys some amnesty and all of that, to be released, to they should face the wrath of the law. And the High Commissioner here, or the ambassador, told them very clearly, said that those laws are meant for their own citizens and non-citizens of these two countries. So in this country, in our own nation here in Nigeria, what I was always said in the past, and I want to suggest again today, let us give a period of 6 months, for instance, to mop up illegal firearms and sensitize the public enlightenment, sensitize them, submit within 6 months. After that, the National Assembly will come up with a legislation that will make illegal possession of firearms a capital offense. Actually, as I discussed with one of my colleagues, one of my very close friends, it's not so many years back, and he told me, my age, you mean if they arrest my son with a gun, he will be killed? I said, of course, yes. Why not? If you've been told, given enough notice that within such a period of time, if you have any gun illegally in your possession, go and surrender it, and you fail to comply, you reap what you sow. But back to your question, let me say too that the security agencies need to buckle up. They need to intensify the efforts in intelligence gathering and intelligence sharing. See, one thing is to gather intelligence, another is to work with it. And let me also add something to the statement you made that the duty of the police to prevent crime, not to fight it. That is not right. Because what you cannot prevent, when it eventually happens, you must fight it. So fighting it too is part of their responsibility, you know. So it's a two-way something. So the security agencies need to sit up, gather more intelligence, share the intelligence, synergize, work together. There should be no acrimony, no unhealthy competition, and all of that. Because at the end of the day, it is the peace of this nation, maximum security, that will benefit everybody.
Okay.
Everybody.
Let me comment
because
now.
Like I've always said again, in the absence of security, no form of human endeavor takes place.
Absolutely.
So there should be no sentiments whatsoever. And there was this issue, talked about this cashless policy which was introduced. Now, during the politics period, when people were campaigning and all of that, the elections came and went, a lot of those guys that were engaged are no longer engaged along that line. So they're now falling back to other crimes, not the ones they committed during the elections, like going to attack communities, you know, stealing, breaking things, killing and all of that, taking money. So these are the issues we're having in this country. Then again, our population is exploding, if it has not exploded already. We have a lot of youths, young persons, who are not employed. Right now, as soon as that cashless policy was put in place, there was no cash in circulation. There was so much hunger, frustration, poverty. And you can't believe, a number of times I sent my staff or my PAs to the bank to go and let me collect some money. They go spend hours and come and say, sir, we couldn't get cash. Why? And I had to reach out to 2 of my account officers in 2 different banks. I said, look, the governor of Central Bank said he has printed more than enough new currencies and given to the commercial banks. He said that he's not telling us the truth. And up till this moment, we still don't have enough new currencies. A lot of people are asking questions. What is the problem? Is that we don't have money to print more?
Quite a number
or is it that the printing machines are broken down?
Right, quite a number of issues you have raised, traversing even different sectors, the financial sector, for example. But I'd like to quickly pick up on a point you made about deterrent earlier on. And you know, what we hear from the police, security agencies, the kind of signal, the messaging we hear is that we're on top of it. We're ready for anything that comes. In fact, I recall listening to one of the spokesperson recently saying, well, nobody is above the law. We're going to persecute anybody and ensure that if you're found wanting, you'll be persecuted. But now hearing you talk about deterrent, and I wonder, Is it because the police or security agencies want to seem as though, okay, they've got things covered, that they come up with that messaging? But behind the scenes, when it's time to make policies or influence policy making, law making, do they lay these things bare and say, well, I mean, these laws are not helpful? Is that something that maybe you experienced during your time? So, yes, it's important to have the show of force, but in reality, if the laws are not, or the punishments are not enough to prevent, by the way, my colleague was saying the primary responsibility is to prevent, not as though that's the only responsibility. Then when that is missed, they can escalate to fighting and all of that. But behind the scenes, do we have security agencies, the police maybe primarily, raising this issue, saying the laws are not working, we need to tweak this law so that there is more deterrent? I don't know about the capital punishment for firearm possession, but in that line, really.
Sorry, let me give you another example of deterrence, where deterrence works. When Peter Obi was the governor of Anambra State, he contained kidnapping. How did he do it? If a kidnapped victim is traced to your house, the governor himself at that time, Mr. Peter Obi himself, will go with the police officers, with caterpillars, bulldozers and all of that, and the building will be brought down after the suspects have been rescued. And to a very large extent, that solved kidnapping problem in Anambra State. And that was a major achievement in terms of deterrence. We're in a country where we don't talk about equality before the law. We talk about inequality before the law. And it's not helping us, not taking us anywhere. Let me just mention something that's not directly related to what I'm saying here. When you drive on the roads, on our streets here in Abuja, for instance, you see some political appointees, elected officers. Their plate numbers are covered with black nylon. And in those vehicles, you even find police officers, policemen there. Now the question is, why will somebody cover his plate number? If you are an ordinary citizen and you cover your plate number, the police, I'm sure, will harass you, will arrest you. You might be accused of wanting to use the vehicle for some criminal activities so that when you succeed and all of that, your vehicle number will not be known. But yet, some of these guys are up there are doing things like that. So we really need to re-strategize, change our modus operandi, whatever we do in this country. Doing the same thing the same way over and over and expecting different results, it doesn't work. It won't give us any results. We must change our modus operandi. Speaking
of doing things differently, Mr. Ogbodo, and still on the wavelength of deterrence, after the elections, the conclusion of the process, the Inspector General of Police had said that over 700 persons were arrested for electoral violence. How strong is that a statement of deterrence to those who are perpetrating electoral violence? From your own point of view, what should be done, to take that up as a statement of deterrence to those who may want to perpetrate electoral violence in the future?
Well, one thing we must understand here is this. Regrettably, those who use these guys as thugs, their children are not part of them. Their children are not part of them. I recall when I was Commissioner of Police in Gombe State, way back 2003. Just before the election at that time, I addressed the public on TV and on radio and all of that. And even at the meetings we held. And I told the youths, I said, look, if anybody comes to you to say, come and be a thug for me, tell him, sir, I hope your children are going to join us. And some of the politicians came to me and said, CP, so you want my child? I said, so your child cannot do that, but you want somebody else's child to do that? We need to enlighten them. We need to educate them. We also need to encompass a lot of these things in the school curriculum from the primary to even up to university level. We need to tell them their do's and their don'ts and the consequences. All of this will go a long way in reshaping our society. So there's so much we need to do. When I talked about public enlightenment, sensitization, that can be extended to the churches, in the mosques, in the social electronic media, in town hall meetings, in banners or billboards here and there, telling people what not to do, and if you do it, this is what you get. There is a consequence. Because we are not doing much in that regard. A lot of people still think that they can do anything and get away with it, and they don't even see anything wrong with what they're doing. Forgetting that they're breaching the laws. And that's why there's so much insecurity. Back to the statement you said the police used to make. That sounds like a broken record, as far as I'm not concerned. Something happens today, tomorrow you say, you're on top of the situation.
Beyond enlightenment, Mr. Gwadu, 700 is quite a number. And we have 18 political parties that participated in the presidential election, and even much more at the governorship level. Shouldn't we move beyond enlightenment, if we're going to send a statement of deterrence to say, okay, at the level of prosecution, so-and-so political party participated in electoral violence? Shouldn't we move to a culture of naming and shaming?
Look, sorry, I almost forgot that question, the issue you raised about the arrest of over 700 persons during the election period. We have a problem with the process of prosecuting suspects in this country. You'll be shocked that after 3, 4, 5, 6 months, nobody will hear about those cases anymore. Cases will be adjourned here and there. Some lawyers will be going there to defend the indefensible, justify the unjustifiable in court and all of that. All of these are compounding our problems. So if we can have a judiciary that attend to criminal offenses timeously, it will also go a very long way to solve this problem we're talking about now. It's not just enough to come and say on a daily basis, you're on top of the situation. A situation that's always on top of you. You are claiming on top of it. And nothing is changing.
No, but about this whole mix of, as you said, our prosecution process is somewhat flawed, if I get it correctly.
Yes.
And you talked about lawyers coming in to defend the indefensible and justify the unjustifiable.
Yes.
But what does that speak of our system? I mean, growing up, I do know that as the society itself was part of the security apparatus. But now it looks as if it's us against them. What changed, and how can we revert to what it used to be?
You see, in those good old days you're talking about, our moral values were highly respected and applied to. But these days, all of that has gone. Like I told you before, population was not in any way near what we have today now. And over there in the villages where we all came from, all the smaller towns, your child is also my child. So if I see your child misbehaving, I'll caution the child, call him or her to order. But these days, everybody's on his or her own. When you do that kind of, say, my friend, go and do, what's your business with that? So we have a lot of challenges, That's why I said, if there is a way we can encompass all of these things in the school curriculum, starting from the primary school, let us tell them, start with them when they're young. Don't do this. If you do this, is a consequence, this is a penalty. No, all of that is not being done right now. And, that's how I always talk about defending the indefensible. Not necessarily the lawyers alone. Justifying the justifiable. Not just lawyers alone. And of course, in the Constitution, there's a section of the Constitution that says that makes provision for presumption of innocence. And I've always said, I wish that section can be amended to say the person will presume innocent, But when proven innocent. But for somebody who is caught red-handed in the act, why would such presumption hold? He cannot presume innocent because he was caught red-handed in the act. So these are some of the amendments we need to have in our laws.
Okay, Alfred, this matter of moving beyond where we are, the Barrister Obaudu has talked about the fact that growing up, our moral values were there and they were applied across the society. But now one would think that with the advancing in technology and knowledge, we would apply it to those values and make the difference that we need. So if we're having this challenge, what do we need to do? How do we come out of this mix to the point where it's not just about fighting crime, but actually preventing it, consequence management, and against the laws that we have already?
We need to understand that sometimes when we want to deal with a problem and we are taking it from the top, the Nigerian situation seems to be a case of our trying to pluck the fruits of a tree to kill it rather than uprooting the trees. We have poverty as the base, as the foundation of most of these conflicts. And the type of poverty we have in Nigeria is not lack of money, lack or absence of money. It is a moral bankruptcy that has degenerated from time. One coming from abuse of public office, and like my statesman, Mr. Obadu just said, we have situations of public officers conducting the affairs of the state against the procedures and with utter impunity. There are no consequences. And this same group of people mutate to higher levels of leadership, and they continue to fester their virus on the general public or the society. And they seem to have also taken down the criminal justice administration systems, because if you look around, you find that, for instance, I can say confidently that over 40% of our security men are guarding few elements in our society, mostly political office holders and private citizens, rather than protecting the communities. And you will also find situations where you walk into an office, the man there does not have a future. The wage he takes home cannot address the needs and the challenges he faces: house rent, feeding, medicals, no functional facilities. So you see, it's generic. Now we are looking at developing people in this kind of environment. What kind of people do you think you are going to make out of them? It's impossible to have an insecure man, like I would always say, provide security for you. People are financially insecure. They are socially insecure. Now we have other threats eating into it. They can't even express themselves. We just had an election, and the reactions coming from the election shows that people, some section of the people were not satisfied, some felt disenfranchised. Even from the point of picking up PVCs, people felt that there were deliberate collusions and attempts by certain people to stop them from accessing their PVCs that would have helped them to make choices of who they make their leader and who makes decisions and manages their resources. So we are looking at poverty. Poverty not only being weaponized, poverty has become a vehicle driving the entire nation to our doom. People are not only poor that they don't have money, they have no regards for rule of law. They have absolute contempt for the lives and properties of others. You know, drug has also taken a place in the society. Now, I'm going to touch the issue of the drugs, because narcotics seems to be a free-for-all. If you go to check out some of the bandits, they live on drugs. How do they get these drugs? Where do they source them from? Which routes do they take to bring them into the country? And we have our borders. They are porous. The customs are doing their best. The immigrations are putting on. But listen, these same people are taken from here. If you go and assess the wealth of an average public officer, I can tell you, 60% of what they have did not come from their work. It came from alternative sources, which are not legitimate. So if we have to deal with it, I think it's time we sat down and begin to address the issue of merit, where we have to allocate opportunities and benefits rather than vest our future on people with character, people that, you know, by merit qualifies to do those assignments. We also have to look at this. I'm looking at the solutions, because we cannot enumerate the insecurity challenges and what goes with it just in sitting in one place. I can tell you that most of the public officers might not be even listening to what we're saying. They're not interested. The man is there hoping to make his own ends.
If I may come in here, and both of you have to weigh in on this. You talked about poverty and weaponized poverty. So let's just say poverty of the mind, poverty of money, poverty of morals, poverty of appreciation for life. Well, so generalizing poverty as here, poverty as it is. But does that negate the laws as they are right now? Because many will say our laws need to be amended, our laws need to be amended. But as the laws are, you a security expert, the barrister Obaudu here, a lawyer and a security expert as well. So does poverty negate the laws? How do we begin to enforce the laws as they are to the point that these violent attacks are curbed and ended once and for all?
The fact is that poverty comes with mental health issues. And you don't make laws for a madman. You can only make laws for a responsible, sane human being. A poor man is worse than a lunatic because he grabs any opportunity, he sees opportunities as lifelines. That's why people could sell, for instance, their PVCs or their votes for just mere 2,000 naira, when trillions are going to be budgeted across years for the development of the society. Poverty is worse than any disease we can imagine. And except those in authority begins to see the consequence and realign themselves, because these are agents of destruction in some sense. Where they are supposed to be builders of society, their morals cannot carry the assignments they are given to do. So you see them compromise on basic values. You see them compromise on key components of public service that could have helped people to align and behave better. So when you have those things away, and it's driven by poverty, if I don't know the value of clean water, I will assume that taking just any water will serve my thirst or quench my thirst. Now, the after effect is that I will contract diseases and sicknesses that could take or terminate my life. So that is the problem with poverty. And the type of poverty we have in Nigeria is not only chronic, it's demonic. It's human-induced. Go ahead.
Mr. Honorable, I just wanted to let you know, let me bring it here to Barrister Obaudu as we begin to add. Barrister Obaudu, weigh in on this matter of poverty and how it affects the laws as they are. He's talked about you can't use poverty, you can't make laws for a madman. And the average person is, I mean, how would you respond to this?
To a large extent, I agree with what Mr. Ononubu has said, but let me also say too that poverty is not an excuse for one to go into crime. It's not. I mean, I was watching the television and I saw a blind person who was arranging, I think different colors, was making, were they beads or something like that? I don't know, I was able to do that. People are not, even those that are physically challenged, so that's any money. But when you're not physically challenged, you are very sound in health and everything, you are not prepared to work, it's just because of the situation we find ourselves in this country. So everybody is looking forward to quick fix. Politicians see politics as a do or die affair. So a lot of, and nobody cares about the sufferings that the ordinary Nigerian is going through. And we see some others in living affluent life, so much affluence. And like I said before, what are they doing to warrant all of those? So these are the things. So a lot of Nigerians are frustrated and very angry as I'm talking to you now. Because we believe, I personally believe that this nation, Nigeria, will be so blessed with the resources we have in this country. We shouldn't be facing all these challenges we're having. Thank God empowerment programs are beginning to come up at the federal level and in some states. But the percentage, the number of people being attended for now is grossly inadequate. We're talking a nation that has a population of close to 200 million, if not more. And the population that is unemployed is so high.
Mr. Obaudu, in closing, in your closing thoughts, what do you say would?
And all of these are affecting security. In conclusion, I will advise government to invest more in empowering the youths. And they should also be told that it doesn't pay to resort to crime. No, it doesn't. Do the needful. Abide by our laws. Get something to do to earn you an income. Start small and grow big. That's how it is in other political climes. So that's it, yes.
Thank you very much, Barrister Felix Ogbaudu, is a retired Assistant Inspector General of Police and also Security Consultant. Thank you for speaking with us this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Back to you guys in Lagos.
All right, let's wind up, Mr. Anonigbo. Two issues. One is coming up today. The NGF will be discussing security votes. They'll be meeting with agencies, EFCC and the rest. So it speaks to the fact that there's actually some sort of funding for security. Whether or not it's done well is another case entirely. And I wonder what you'll be asking them to do about the security vote, which has been largely shrouded in secrecy. And just to add, I saw a post you put up in September 2021 saying you deeply sympathize with the individual who shall be taking over the saddles of leadership after PMB. And you went on to talk about some issues. Merge that together, because the security votes also spills over into the next administration anyway.
Yes. I like to put it in this way. Funds will not solve the insecurity problems in Nigeria. We need to begin to look at what kind of resources should we put on ground, what kind of opportunities should we create to accommodate generations of Nigerians who are developing their skills, their talents, and their capacity to engage. In the absence of effective management of these people, they will be vulnerable to ideas that will tend to drive them to crime. And also the fact that if you look at the funds that come even to the government, because security votes most times goes to the governors and some other agencies, a hungry man is an angry man. If you equip people to police people and you do not create opportunity for those people to become resourceful and productive, you are just creating anarchy. People will never value anything. Even those you are giving the money to will become part of the problem. And what we have seen is that we have resources going to agencies, and it turns out that individuals within those agencies become enemies to those agencies because they want to have it, to cash in on the funds, and they don't give anything back to the society in return. Now, people are scared, we live in an accountable society where you are held accountable for what you say in the public, and nobody wants to get the hammer. Now, the fact remains that we need to change the quality of leadership that has led us to this point.
Just to be specific,
yes.
Would you be advocating that the sole discretionary powers of the governor over the security vote be removed or tweaked?
Totally. Governors are supposed to be supervisors. They are not supposed to be owners and landlords. They are supposed to be public servants. And the kind of powers vested on the governors is making development of this country impossible. Look at the election. Most of the problems we had with funding and stuff, and even decisions on quality of election, are coming from governors. These are people who have excess power and they control funds. People want to, benefit and get patronage.
We really have to go, Mr. Anonigbo, but just to be clear, you said, in response to Bukola's question, you said security votes should be taken away from the governors. Then to who?
No, it should be put down on the ground. You see, there are...
Someone has to supervise.
Yes, the police have divisions. The sharing structure.
To whom should it be given?
It should be given to police, should be given to communities. Communities can protect themselves better than the police. And policemen are taken from these communities. That's why I'm one of the advocates of community policing. Because in community policing structure, they come from the community. They know the thieves. And there should be a prosecution system that takes care right from the grassroots. So if you are breaking the law within the structures of a community, they know you are a bigger threat to other people.
Okay.
The punishment will be swift and there will be lasting results.
And I think that's a great place to anchor. Mr. Alfred Ononugbo is a forensic investigator, criminal intelligence specialist, and security consultant. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been my pleasure out here. Thank you very much.
We'll take a moment now, switch gears, turn our attention to politics. Yes, elections may have come, but they have certainly not gone. That's in a moment. Stay with us.